All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our career panel for November 2022. Um, yeah, let's get started. So today we have two panelists, and may you please introduce yourselves and what your career is.
I'll let you go first.
Oh, you mean me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Cool. Well, my name is Erika, and I work as a cybersecurity analyst at NASA and out of Moffett Fields in Ames. Such, we analyze network traffic and we work to protect the nation's assets going into space and such. So it's always kind of interesting to sort of poke around and see, I suppose, computers in space.
Cool. And I'm Anthony Kalhoff, and I'm a cyberspace officer for the United States Air Force. On my way transitioning to the private sector. The role of officers is always a little nebulous, but most recently I was sort of program manager for a unit in the Air Force that develops software for the military.
Great answers. Next question is, what led you to choose a career and what did it take to get there?
Let's see. Oh, if we're going in order and such, I can go as well. I think kind of tough for me to answer always like kind of what led me to choose my career, because I think for me, I'm 28 right now, and I don't feel that I really went into a kind of technical degree until later on in college. So for me personally, like what kind of led me to choose a career not just like in software or like engineering in general, but what led me to go down the cybersecurity specialization was really it's a field that kind of helps you understand things from a larger, I guess, like a higher level view, and you get to sort of see, like, I suppose depending on like the way that you approach it, you get to use a lot of bits of information to sort of triage and to build like a better understanding of like the apps that you're using and the specific ways that those apps can be either broken or potentially be used against you. And well, that's sort of kind of the reality of the world that we're in like today, when everything is so like digitized and hard to avoid.
Cool. For me, it's kind of a two-pronged answer to how did I get into this job, because there's the one aspect of the military, and then within that, it's cyberspace, software, and cybersecurity. So for the military, both of my parents were military. Both of them were enlisted, and my dad did 21 years as an enlisted Army sergeant. And so I always knew the military was an option. Then when I was getting ready for college, obviously looking for ways to fund that. So an intern or a scholarship with ROTC, which is the Reserve Officer Training Corps, made it a lot easier to figure out how I was going to pay for it. And then, you don't have to worry about debt afterwards. You kind of have job security.
Mm-hmm.
So those are reasons that it was approachable to me, and that's what I ended up doing. And then how I ended up with computers, I did computer stuff in high school. I thought I was going to be a video game developer once I finished with the military. But I was still touching on physics, and that's what I ended up doing my undergrad in at Penn State. And then I wanted to be a physicist, but the military only does like 6 of those jobs a year out of the 20,000 ROTC, whatever it is. So that didn't happen. Instead, I put cybersecurity. So that's what I got. And I've just really liked it. I mean, it fills the same niche as physics, where you just want to figure out what's the next step for something, and like what's the underlying reason to it. And both of them kind of just magically produce results. So physics is like the core understanding of the universe, and computer science and cybersecurity are the manifestations of logic. Like if you just have instructions at the very end of the day, what can that get you? And it's been pretty fun. And now more and more I'm into the business side of things, because in the same way, it's like if you have a bunch of people, how do you organize them to create something in the world, and what are the secrets behind that? And throughout my career, which hasn't been too long, I'm also 28. It's just been, what's the next opportunity for me? And that's what I anticipate continuing to do as I go forward.
Very nice, very nice. So the next question is, what do you enjoy the most about your career? And is there anything you don't like in particular?
Ooh, loaded question right there.
I think I'll jump in first. I like the civic service aspect of the military. I think maybe like saying nationalism goes too strong, because it's not just a blind faith in it, but it's the understanding that everybody lives in this society, and this governance only works if you contribute to it. And so being involved with the government in some capacity is more directly contributing to that. And there are lots of different ways to do that, rather than just the military, which has its own downsides, which, part of the question is traveling without really your choice. So if you end up getting stationed somewhere, you have to go there. And then obviously there's a really big moral dilemma, depending on what job you end up with in the military. Like this and police officers have a very heavy potential of, human life. And you have to be very cognizant of those choices before you enter that career field, and understand what your limitations are, and what you're about, what you stand for, and if the government aligns with those things. And it forces you to have those conversations. And if you come out the other side still believing in your government, then you end up a little more invested in the world and the society that we live in.
Nice. Right. So those then. Cool. So I think it's really interesting, actually, that I really appreciate how you use like sort of the phrase the civic service like aspect of it, because I think like since we're both in like government-based like institutions, like it inevitably like that's something that you kind of like have to like consider and such. NASA is like, even on like the worst days, it's very hard to not feel, I guess, like some level of I guess like a little bit of an adrenaline rush a little bit whenever you see like you get to see a lot of like the cooler projects and such that a lot of the engineers, like the actual like engineers and such are working on, and all this talk about going into space. Like even like on like the most like jaded days, usually that does something to kind of like perk you up like a little bit. For me, I like knowing that the work that we do inevitably does like contribute to something that's like something that's very like good, and I think resonates with a lot of people, regardless of like their nationality or it's just the idea of like being able to go into space or doing like space travel. I think that's something that a lot of people find like very important, even if they're not huge space nerds. For me, like it's definitely like a drop. You have to realize that it's a drop in the bucket and such. Like the work of just like, all right, we're going to analyze like network traffic across like the whole of like of NASA. Like every incident that you read up is basically just, again, like maybe like smaller than a drop in the bucket, but inevitably like it does help, because there's ultimately like a lot of the missions that they talk about and like these wider like goals that they have, like they're driven by like people. And so by supporting people in it, you support the missions that, or the goals that they stand for. I'd say probably the downside to all of that though, at least working in government, probably the downside is going to be like issues of just like, you know, red tape. Things tend to move much more slowly, I think, in government in general, when you compare it to like the private sector and such. Certain I guess like things that they do may not like necessarily like resonate with you as well. And those are just things that I think you will encounter in one way or another, no matter where you go, in terms of, you know, what company or what like organization that you work for.
Erika said two things that I just wanted to add a couple more thoughts on. When it comes to cybersecurity, since we're both sort of in that field, I've kind of drifted away more to the software development side of the house. But one of the problems with cybersecurity is you're working to make sure that nothing happens, as opposed to a lot of other career fields where you want things to happen. Cybersecurity is like, I just want everything to keep going the same way that it's been going, the least intrusive way possible. So it can be hard to get feedback that you're doing a good job, because when you're doing a good job, nothing happens. And then the other thing is the bureaucracy side of the house. I'm transitioning to the private sector. And so I've been doing an internship with a data storage company called NetApp. And they're also a really big company. And I'm realizing that a lot of the things that I chalked up to being government bureaucracy are just big organization bureaucracy. And it's hard to get away from the rule by committee and, you know, feeling like a cog in the machine, that kind of thing, regardless of if it's public sector or private sector. And that's just what we have to live with.
All right. Next question is, what do you do in your career on a day-to-day basis?
See, I don't know, Anthony. I guess I will go because you just talked. So what I do on a day-to-day basis, well, we're both cybersecurity focused people, so that's actually pretty cool, because I get the feeling that we probably focus on like different, we might probably be focusing like on different specializations, if we want to describe it that way. Or at least the things that we're concerned about on my team is analyzing like network traffic, attributing these to like user behavior and such. So the greatest analogy that I've heard someone say, it's like, we're trying to ultimately, like when we get like alarms or we get like alerts from machines of like, you know, we observe this like really suspicious behavior. Like, what is this? Is this just like ad traffic, or is this like signs that like a host has been like, you know, a host has been like hacked or something? And our goal ultimately is to build up like a narrative, like a crime scene almost, and try to understand like, you know, what actually like happened here. Is this something that warrants like further like investigation? And a lot of this is like, you have to understand like how computers like actually navigate web applications or whatever like applications that the user is utilizing on their end. It involves a lot of understanding of how those applications like work, you know, because like, you know, this particular like particular like website has been flagged by a couple of a couple of open sources for like potential malicious behavior, but is that actually what's going on? Like, it's sort of, I guess that's part of the challenge of like the job, is being able to know like when we want to like really go in and heavily like investigate it, because you know, it's time and it's resources to do so. And I guess this is sort of kind of relating back to what I was mentioning like earlier, of just like, you know, you get your incentive of like of building up like a really clear like picture of like what happened here, how did it happen and why. That's it's always like kind of like you find like some interesting things and such every now and then.
Is my sound still coming through? I switched.
Yes.
There's some
Mhm.
background noise. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Yeah, so for a part of my career, I was very focused on the cybersecurity thing, and so it is responding to incidents that come up, but it changes a lot. So as an officer for the military, the whole concept is they train us to lead, whatever that means to different people. But what it means for the military is that if we put you in a situation and you get cut off from whoever's supposed to be your boss, you can operate in a way that gets us closer to the mission. So there's an understanding that without everybody else, you're not going to, know it's perfect. But an 80% plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow, especially when you're talking about warfare and some of the environments that we operate in. So what that looks like on a day-to-day basis is most of the work in the military gets done by enlisted. There are two categories, if you've never heard of them: enlisted and officer. Officers tend to have they need a degree before they start the program, but a ton of enlisted also have degrees, advanced degrees, that is. And it's just more that officer is based on leadership, enlisted is more based on operating equipment or performing tasks. So for me, I tend to look at what our overarching objective is, and then I map the people in my command to whatever we decide we need to do to get that done. Luckily, I don't operate in many environments where I need to like just make a decision on my own. So even though I'm the leader, quote unquote, and at the end of the day, everything that we do right and wrong comes back on me. I try to incorporate everybody's decision. So there's a lot of talking, and it ends up being a lot like a project manager in the private sector, where you have objectives and you try to organize everybody's work towards that. And then in the technical side of it, I need to know as much as lets me talk to everybody and lets me understand the problems. But at the end of the day, somebody else is going to solve it. They're going to come up with the solution, and I figure out, what are our blockers to make that happen? What do the other organizations need to know so that we all coordinate and work together? That's a very high level idea of it. Luckily, I've been able to be a little more technical in some of my jobs. And so I'm just a programmer some days. And that is what it sounds like. I'm sure most people are familiar with it. The only thing I'll add to that is that the military is more and more agile, which is a great thing to hear. And agile being like a keyword, like you go Google it and learn what that means. But basically you just try to iterate really quickly. You want to fail so that you can learn and do better, which is something that FIRST does and emphasizes. And it's just, kind of the way the world works nowadays. That's about it.
Great answers. So the next question is, looking back now, is there anything you wish you had known before entering your career, or are there any particular skills to have for your career? We'll start off with Ellie.
Oh crap! My name is not corresponding to it. Let's see. Oh, it's the name on my Zoom, but some things that would probably be good to learn without going really specific. I mean, we usually tell people that you should try to understand things like how network traffic works. And I know that I've mentioned this a lot, but it's because a lot of times, like, I think people, or even when they start to explore like engineering, and specifically like software engineering, there tends to be a focus on, I guess, like more like the programming like aspect of it. Like, you know, let's build like an application or start like your own like React like web app in less than like a minute or so. And that is important and all. You need to understand like how like applications work if you want to like properly like assess like their behavior and understand like how to break them. But I think like ultimately like what really helped me, I guess, like starting out was knowing how to learn, I guess, which is, it's a pretty like vague way of saying like you need to learn like, one, how you learn, generic you being used here, and how best that you retain like information. Because for me, I think what I did try like some, I guess, like programming classes like in like high school, a few like early on in college, and you know, like the usual like comp sci student like role. And it was, I mean, I guess like for me, it just never really sank very well, particularly because I like to be able to see like what I code, like what does that actually like do? Does it create like an input box for the user to interact with? Like, how does this I guess data structure or something impact like the thing that I'm interacting with like right now? For me, like knowing how to, I guess, like pursue that like information really like helped in terms of, I guess, like self-teaching like myself, or teaching like myself, once I decided that, you know, like I'm not really going to focus on like the kind of materials that the school curriculums will. There's a lot of like free resources online. I will just use that. And that's sort of the thing that like, I guess like the narrative that a lot of people told me back then. And I think it's still being like kind of pushed today, like, you know, oh, teach your kid like how to like code, or, you know, like Python for like kindergartners or something. I don't know if they have it for kindergartners, but you see picture books of it. And it's sort of like, yes, the information is there, but your ability to like retain and like conceptualize that and apply it to something that you interact with, that's, I guess, like something that I think like once I figured out like how I do it, like personally for myself, things were still difficult, but they got much easier, I think, as time went. So I guess to sum it up, knowing how you learn and how you like personally like retain like information is really important in kind of keeping like your motivation, even when like the materials themselves get very difficult, or you have to have like a certain amount of like self-discipline to continue on in the field, no matter like what field that you are in.
Yeah, I mean, Erica threw out some really good stuff. I'll just add a buzzword onto what she said, and that's like learning to solve problems by first principles. So you can like know what fancy app does something, but you should really strive to understand what is happening at a very core level. And you won't, like, I don't know how to build a router, but I know what packets do, and I in general know how the internet operates. And from that, when I'm asking questions about problems, I can say, well, I know this to be true, so how is like Kerberos actually solving this whatever networking problem? Like, how does the key go to the switch? That kind of stuff. I mean, if none of those words make sense, the idea is what's happening on a physical level, and how does that build up to the problems that I'm talking about? So I agree with that for sure. So I have some vague suggestions, I guess, things that I wish I knew earlier, and I have two like more concrete ones.
I don't think I can hear the audio.
Yeah, I can't either. It was right as you were suggesting this thing about vague suggestions. That's when it kind of cut out.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, how long have I been out?
I think since you were talking about the vague suggestions, I said.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
First vague suggestion is don't be so intense, just in general. Like, it's really tempting to come out of college and be like, all right, I know this stuff. Here we go. We're going to do this, all this, everything right now. And you don't really need to do that. There's a lot to take in. So like, take it in and don't always be so quick to act. I think we live in a world that really incentivizes change, and we should, but also there's a parable. I don't know if I'm going to get the name exactly right. Chester's fence, Chesterton. Hold on. Chesterton fence. Yes, Chesterton's fence. So it goes, there's this fence in the way. Someone says, hey, let's move it. They move it. Oh, look, it's really important. So just know why that fence was built in the first place before you get rid of it. Okay, concrete advice number one is learn your personal finance information as soon as you can. So I don't say anything else about the rest of the site, but Reddit has a good subreddit, personal finance. You go to their about page, you can learn a lot about things that you should invest in first and things that you need to take care of so you can take care of yourself. Second vague advice is leadership is very personal. So like you can read a lot of books on it and everybody has their opinion, but for every person that does something like Steve Jobs, there's another person who does it like Jimmy Carter. And whatever your leadership style is completely valid. Like just lead by your own intuition, your heart, and empirical evidence, and you're going to be good. Don't buy into that you need to be exactly this way. Just find what you're good at and play into that. The second practical advice, since we're doing computer stuff, is start deploying and figuring out how to use machine learning models and AI systems, because that's only going to get bigger. And if you know how to do it, you're not going to feel as scared. There's a lot of good resources like Hugging Face and Google Colab. You can practice that stuff right now. And then the final piece of vague advice is to give yourself a break when you're going through life, especially as you leave high school, you go through college in your first couple of years, your brain chemistry is still developing. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things wrong, and that's okay. It's just part of figuring out what it means to be you and to be alive and everything. So don't worry about it. Everybody stumbles. That's my stuff.
I'd just like to add on that sort of like kind of brings up the learning how to fail. I don't think that's exactly how you phrased it, but I think that was another thing that I had to learn in college, is like learning how to fail. Yeah, you're going to make mistakes and you're probably going to mess up like here and there, but know how to get back up. That was, yeah.
All right. Is there anything that you've learned in the workplace that can be applied to robotics teams? And is there anything you've learned from FRC that can be applied to your job?
I definitely have robotic stuff, which is that integration is 80% of the problem. So if you come up with a really cool solution, try to incorporate that with other solutions as fast as possible, because figuring out all those little interconnections is where most of deadlines go to die. So this isn't a concept of agile is using your minimum viable product. If you have a solution, build the smallest version of that you can test the principles of that solution, incorporate it in the whole system, because the whole system's all you care about. You can have the best solution in the world. If it doesn't work with the whole system, it doesn't matter. So integration is really important. Could you say the second part of your question again? I got so excited.
Are there any, what's it called? Is there anything you've learned from FIRST that can be applied to your job?
Oh, well, I'm just starting with FIRST, but already I'm, very impressed with everyone's ability to jump into something they don't know about and contribute and, strive to be better. It's really easy to stay in your own lane. And like once you develop a little bit of expertise, you just do that forever. But you gotta keep growing. You have a growth mindset that you're not what you know right now. You're the person that strives to be better. And you can accomplish things as long as you keep working at it. Thanks.
All right. Let's see. Sorry, what was, you said something about, the question was, I think, what did you learn in the workspace that can be applied to the robotics team? What was the second part of that?
Is there anything you've learned from FIRST that can be applied to your job?
Let's see. All right. So I guess to start out, things that can be kind of applied to my workplace that can be applied to the robotics team. I think probably like the thing that's like coming to mind, because it was a lesson that I guess it's taken like a while to sort of like sink in, is just be able to kind of, you're working with like a team of people and such. You can come up with like the greatest like technical like solution to something, but if it's not like realistic, or if it's not like applied like realistically to the people that it's meant to help, or like the process that it's meant to like solve, it's not going to last very long. There's a lot of times when there's the temptation, I guess, like to have like the latest and greatest like technology, the most expensive like piece of equipment, insert like a couple of like industry like buzzwords here and there, but like you have to like be realistic and to actually like ask yourself, like, does this like really solve like the core root of the problem that people are having, whether they realize it or not? Like, is spending like the budget, or not even just like the money budget on it, is spending like the time and energy on this like specific like tool or like component? You kind of need to know, like, I guess at least in my field, like, it's sort of, you have to kind of be able to like balance out how often like you like pursue those things, because being like proactive is good. Being able to like pick up and like solve problems is good, but you also need to be able to know how to do it in a way that doesn't, well, one, it doesn't burn you out. Two, it doesn't create more problems for you or like the team members that are going to be using that. And kind of what leads on into like another thing is like, you have to also be able to like learn to talk to people. I know that's kind of, it's kind of like a no-brainer, but sometimes like when most of your day is spent like analyzing like the output from like machines, like you're using like search engines, well, Google in my case, you're just like Googling like, or DuckDuckGoing like answers and stuff, or like solutions to like technical like problems. You tend to like lose a lot of your ability to kind of like communicate like effectively to people, without like getting like impatient with them, or kind of coming across as being like not very like friendly or like good to work with. And you might think like, well, I'll just be like, I'll just do it all like myself or something. But those are like people that you work with, and you don't have to be like friends with them, I guess. That you don't have to, but generally, like, you know, it's much easier to kind of remain on like amicable like terms and have like a decent like working relationship with them. And honestly, like, who knows? I mean, there's in this like this day and age, like it's still like a lot of remote work, so it's a lot of Slack and a lot of like, I guess, like Teams or whatever like chat application that your workplace like uses. But how you find out a lot about like what people are willing to like talk about and such when you kind of learn to have that you learn to like work with them and then also work with them well, so that it doesn't feel like it's tense whenever you have to ask them for like something. So
Erika, if you don't mind, I have an anecdote just like that. When I was first getting started at ROTC, we do obstacle courses and we take turns leading everybody to get across. So ours was cross this river and all you have is a couple barrels and some plywood. So I'm like, well, I see very intuitively what we're supposed to do here. But what I really did wrong is I was like, this is my solution. I'm in charge, so we're doing it my way. And didn't incorporate anybody else's opinions. We go to do it. It doesn't work right away because nobody else has bought in. And I, instead of, you know, trying to take a step back, learn from that, I just doubled down on it. And I mean, not to be arrogant and say my solution was right, but other teams solved it using the same thing. But I really learned that you can give up one battle to really try to win the entire war. You need to understand that how your team is working towards the end goal is more important than one particular problem is going to be.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, that kind of like issue and such of just like, you have to, you know, like, even if your solution is like right, you know, if you, I guess, like market it or something, if you marketed it in like a really like poor way, then, you know, what does it matter? Like, if it's the right solution, if no one else like wants to take it, it's pretty annoying, honestly, sometimes, because, you know, there's various like other factors that kind of like affect like the way that people like perceive like the solutions that you like put forward, or, you know, you say like, you know, this here is like the real like problem and such. But that's just kind of like a reality that you have to sort of accept. Things that I would take away from this team, though, in terms of like applying that to like my workplaces, probably like it kind of goes along those same like same, I guess, like principles of just like learning to work with like a team and such. It was really neat to kind of see how like people were able to like talk about like all like the different like components and such, like when just like passing by the table at the farmers market, whatnot. And it's like, I guess, like you know, you don't really have like one, you know, the lone genius who just like solves everything, or they just know everything. I mean, maybe you might every now and then, but they're outliers. And really, like, in general, like, I think these kinds of projects are much more like effective if like everyone's able to like contribute in like an effective way and such. So yeah, collaboration, despite being in a field like kind of stereotyped to be full of like really antisocial people.
All right. I think we have one more question left. So the question is, do you have any advice in particular for students who are going to transition from high school to college? Like, since you've been through that experience, would you mind elaborating on how what steps high schoolers can take to adjust into college life? And we'll start off with Anthony.
Yeah, it's a challenging transition. I think, you know, everybody's going to have their own struggles. My struggle was I would always value myself by what I didn't do instead of what I was doing. And it took a toll on my mental health. So instead of, like I was doing ROTC, I was in the physics club, I was actually getting my degree, I'm here on my own, all these things that are intrinsic, or maybe not intrinsic, or, I'm electing to do. I would just look at, oh, I bowed out of helping with this physics lab thing, or I didn't get the grade that I wanted to in this class. And it took a while for me to shift my mentality into starting to list my achievements when I talk to myself. And I don't know if that was society, beating into me, trying to be humble, or just whatever coping mechanism. But once I started being positive about the achievements, life got a lot better. And I think one way you can do that is gratitude exercises. Some people like journaling. Other people have different ways of doing it, but just consistently taking inventory of what you like about your life, and it kind of snowballs as you're more positive about what you already have. More things come to you because you're a more open person and you're more excited to take on risks. I think that'd probably be my biggest thing. Grades are important, sure, but nobody asks about my grades anymore. Just see that I finished, and it really matters what I took away with it. And I do work for some part of the day, but most of my day I just exist. So I would focus on who you are as a human being rather than so focused on school and everything, every opportunity you missed, quote unquote. That's it for me.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I think, we'll probably those kinds of I think the phrase of just I think focus on being who you are as a human being, that actually resonated with me pretty strong. I have something similar, just I think not worded exactly like it, but that's a really it's something that I feel a lot of people will say, and so then people might take it for granted, but it is really important and such, because at the end of the day, if I'm down at I don't know, whatever social event, I'm down at, I don't know, the farmer's market or something, you don't really stop to listen to someone saying oh, I worked so hard, or X amount of hours on this and that and such. They don't want to hear you slogging away at something. They like to hear you kind of excited about whatever you happen to be working on, whether that's robotics, or maybe you're into aquaponics, or maybe you're into painting, or maybe you're a writer and such. Your passions really kind of shine through, and I think people can kind of tell if what you're passionate about and what you truly and genuinely enjoy doing, regardless of your ability or your talent in it and such. I think that really does people pick up on that, whether they consciously realize it or not. For me, I think I mean, not to say coding isn't exciting or whatnot, or not aesthetically pleasing, but I feel that it was a lot easier for me to kind of get to know and talk to people when I would talk to them about hobbies that were outside of what we do at work, and such. I like to draw and such. I like to digitally paint and make web comics and whatnot. It's easy to talk about because if you like it, then well, it's not really a chore to talk about. I'd say for people, especially high schoolers and such, that are transitioning from, I'm assuming 12th grade into a freshman year in college. Let's see. I think the one thing that actually just came to mind was don't focus on I guess trying to have the quote unquote perfect like college experience, because everyone's like college experience is, it's going to be like different. Like the movies and like shows and I don't know, like books and stuff, they present like one view, but that's not really what everyone's is. Like my college, for example, I think, let's see, 2012 to like 2017. Okay, so like for me, I think it probably took like maybe like 5 years to graduate. Like obviously that you need to be like realistic as well. But you need to have like a balance with like realism here, because like, you know, sometimes like loans and, you know, the payments like options that you're using, they have like certain stipulations, like you need to be like taking a certain amount of courses and such per semester, or you need to be like, I don't know, having these kinds of like grades like here and there, or you need to graduate in a certain amount of time and such. And part of, I guess, like growing up, which is you're transitioning from like, you know, a high schooler to like a young adult, basically. Part of that is kind of knowing how to, or knowing to sort of like understand like these options that are available to you, the long-term like consequence, or I don't want to say consequences, that's a very like kind of negative word to use. The perks and the benefits and the potential downsides of each of them. So yeah, the hyper-specific advice here would be accept that paperwork and like legal stuff and finance stuff, accept that they are a part of life and that you need to understand them, and you need to get comfortable with being able to know them, whether that's, you know, I'm going to read through every single like clause in here, or, you know, maybe you can talk to like a financial advisor, and kind of get like a better sense of like what these like things mean for you, or what like this like class load will mean for you. And that kind of transitions nicely actually into my other piece of advice, which is don't burn yourself out. Know how to pace yourself, and to tack onto that, like, you know, work like smarter, like not harder. Grades like are important when we talk about like, you know, you don't want to have like a really low GPA, because, you know, employers will like, they can use that as like something against you when they say like, you know, what's wrong? You know, like we have these two candidates here, like which one should we pick? And they say like, well, this like GPA looks kind of like low. But that doesn't mean that you need to get like a 4.0 GPA, unless if that's something that is like, it's like specifically like important for something that you're going for. I guess it's sort of like in a roundabout way, just saying that like, you know, in college, there's more to it than grades. There's like quite a few things that you can get involved in, whether that's doing something for like fun, or you want to build like connections and like network with people, or maybe you wanting to pick up like a skill or like a hobby and such that is there, that has been made available at like the college and whatnot. But it's tempting to kind of like take them all in at once and try to, you know, bite off more than you can chew. But the only thing that it will happen from that inevitably is like you're going to run out of time and energy to be effective at those kinds of areas and such. So, I mean, for me, like I'm not into physics at all. It was okay at like coding at like the time, but you know, having like coding, physics, and like math at the same time when those were not subjects that I was very strong in. Plus, like I think I was taking like a couple of like other classes, but basically it's like, you know, I'll just like load up on classes and, you know, do a bunch of like job applications on the side. It was hard work, but that resulted in really nothing besides just like putting me in a like worse like mental like headspace and such of like, oh man, like I'm not succeeding at anything. And you don't want that because, you know, you can do that for a certain period of time, but inevitably people just kind of stop. And so, you know, just be careful, I guess, like as you're transitioning from like going from like a high schooler to like being an adult, because, you know, you're going to have to be getting comfortable with making like financial like choices and such, and like class choices or like college like class choices, and you know, what kind of like job do you want to go for, such how will you like make money, but you're also, you know, it's not something that you should burn yourself out on either. So that was kind of a roundabout way of putting things and such, but yeah.
I wanted to tag back in just because, you know, a little floaty of what my advice was, but I, you know, I agree with Erika. Obviously, GPA is not nothing. So you want to do as well as you can. Makes sense. I think my point is just that getting a better GPA is easier when you're easier on yourself. Like when you just start judging yourself by everything you don't do, and at least in my case, like I would get anxiety and just like end up playing League of Legends all day. I knew I had work to do, but I also knew that I like hadn't done it as well as I wanted to in the past. And so it's like, well, we might as well not do it at all. And I mean, your brain does crazy things to you. And just like getting enough sleep, being gracious about what you have, all those things just make it easier to go about your life. And you know, there's a book that I'll recommend, 2 books. There's Atomic Habits, which is all about just like, if you want to do better at things and you want to be more consistent, stop just trying to will it to happen. Like change some of your patterns in your life so that it's a little easier. And the second one, kind of related, is The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh, the 49ers head coach. And that's a little bit of what I'm talking about. If you just do things right, don't always weigh yourself by what happened. Just weigh your intentions and the effort you put into it. And eventually it'll start coming around and it'll get better. And then my last little bit off of what Erika said is, in my experience, passion is not as passionate as you've been led to believe. So like if you're into something, there will be days where you do not want to do that. And that's okay. And that doesn't mean that like you're not good at it or that's not what you should be wanting to do. It's just part of life and comings and goings of motivation. Discipline is cool, but also sometimes if you just want to work on something else, then, you know, don't hold it against yourself, which is the theme of all of my advice. Don't hold it against yourself. You're doing great. That's it for me. Thanks.
All right. I believe that is all the questions for this panel. So thank you very much for attending. I really like the insight from both of you professionals and giving us high schoolers advice on, you know, how to just, you know, go about life and future endeavors. So I'm really grateful for that. And I really enjoyed hearing from your experiences. So yeah, thank you very much.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.